It's my honour to introduce Carey, our keynote speaker today. Anne is a registered nurse and midwife living in Western Australia. The passion that Anne shares in supporting the profession as well as our association will be evident to you today. You will be left with little wonder as to why she was awarded Western Australian of the Year in 2016. Please welcome Anne Carey.
Hello. There are times in our careers that are challenging. These are when we learn about our own vulnerabilities as well as about our strengths. These moments also sharpen our understanding of what matters. 2 years ago, there were two events challenging me. I had then been a nurse and midwife for 26 years, often working in dangerous or difficult environments. I had never found the need to walk away from a job until I found my colleagues and myself being bullied. My own experience of standing up to the bully taught me much. After several months of being targeted by a new manager, I put my faith in the system and complained. The independent report on the matter was interpreted by the manager of the bully, who had been appointed as the decision maker. I was denied access to the original report. The waiting for the decision was drawn out for months, and the decision was delivered the day before I headed back to lead an Ebola team in Sierra Leone. They knew I was headed back that day, and I cannot believe the timing was not intentional. I was given just 10 days to appeal against what was a manifestly inadequate response. On my return from Sierra Leone some months later, I found under Freedom of Information that the original independent report had been seriously misrepresented by the decision maker. I had then come to understand why so many had no faith in the integrity of the system, for it often lacks integrity. I understood that what the Victorian Auditor General said about a manifestly ineffectual response to bullying probably applied all over Australia. Subsequently, I publicly discussed my case, an example of why action is needed to improve the handling of complaints about workplace culture. As the past WA Australian of the Year, I have been doing what I can to agitate for change. In the same period, my experiences in the Ebola treatment centres in Sierra Leone sharpened my focus on what really matters in healthcare. Having a child fit and bleed to death in my arms, as his mother told me that now all 7 of her children and her husband had died in the outbreak, trumped any concerns I had for myself. I realized right then I had no right to self-pity. Indeed, self-pity would have made me less effective as a health professional in that situation. Reflecting back on that moment, I have come to realize that when we are the victims of bullying, our righteous indignation drives us to self-pity. That self-pity, however, does not help us to effectively address the overall problem of toxic workplaces any more than it helps us to be effective when we are treating patients. I started to read the extensive literature on bullying in healthcare. It was obvious that the struggle is ongoing and progress has been slow. I wondered why it was so hard to bring about change in something so manifestly unjust. I believe our old strategies have failed to get results. Repeating the same such strategies after they fail to bring about change is not likely to get us far. I now hope to challenge how we think about solving the problem. I want to go through several ways of viewing the problem. I want to suggest some strategic approaches involving how to react to the problem and how we engage with management. Firstly, I have come to see self-pity in this setting stops us seeing that the real victims are patients who receive substandard care. Self-pity stops us from looking for ways to reduce bullying throughout the workforce. So if we accept that righteous indignation and self-pity are not leading to solutions to the problem of workplace bullying, what might help us get there? We have to think about who we have to convince. When we become focused on the injustices and the injuries we have suffered, we demand justice. Our demands seem to fall on deaf ears. Why? We are not working for social justice advocates. We are not working for departments that have as their aim provision of just outcomes. We are working for departments charged with providing safe, effective healthcare at a price the government can afford. If we want to be effective, we need to make it clear that the effectiveness of healthcare teams is diminished by toxic work environments. We need to talk in terms of patient safety, of patient outcomes. We need to talk about the economic cost of inefficient teams, the cost of replacing staff, the cost of locum staff in places that cannot retain staff, but because people do not want to work there. We have every right to air our unjust treatment, but is probably not understood by those who run the system, and it results in barriers of denial being put in our way. I saw this firsthand in my own journey. Those who run the system do not understand the language of justice. Secondly, we have to remember what healthcare is about. It is basically there to bring care to the suffering. It is an outcome of our innate compassion and kindness that is part of being human. We need to draw more on those values for guidance on how to tackle workplace bullying on a day-to-day basis. Workplace bullying may be a justice issue, but we are not experts at justice. We are experts at care, compassion, and kindness. Those are the tools we have to work with. Kindness is never mentioned in list of performance indicators. It, however, underlies the whole purpose of healthcare. After all, the original hospitals were established to care for the suffering. Reducing suffering is kindness and care in action. We all would agree that our hospitals need to be places of cleanliness. We all agree they need to be places that value safety. We all agree that our hospitals need to be places of expertise. We need to also acknowledge that our hospitals need to be places where kindness is valued. During the Ebola crisis in Sierra Leone, we had health workers come together from all over the world. We had some shared aims that included keeping each other safe and at the same time making a difference. The tone of the place was of workers supporting one another through their struggles with the stress of looking after so many dying people and so little you could do for them. That support for one another is kindness in the workplace. Looking back, I do not believe we would have achieved what we did if the workplace tone was toxic. Kindness for one another was an essential ingredient. There was something moving about why so many had left their safe jobs and assembled from around the world to do a difficult, dangerous, and emotionally draining job for others in a far-off land. This is the courage to be kind in action. This was something that made one proud to be human. We need to get kindness back into our hospitals as an essential value, up there with cleanliness, safety, knowledge, and practical skills. It is the cement that holds the whole thing together. Currently, in our hospitals, when bullying occurs, we tend to focus on denying the behavior of the bully, which is all very understandable if we want to avoid being the next victim. What we neglect to focus on is the need to be kind and support one another. That takes courage because supporting the victims tends to make us the next target. People no longer want to be seen eating lunch with you. It takes courage to support one another in the face of a bully. It takes courage to be kind. If we really want to be better than the bullies, then we need to have that courage. Thirdly, organizations need to accept that bullying will occur. We need to stop shaming organizations because bullying occurs. Then it is more likely to be openly discussed, and plans to reduce it are more likely to be developed. By telling organizations that we see them as failures because they cannot stamp out workplace bullying, we make them more defensive. Then they tell you bullying does not exist. Bullying then is no longer a priority because it does not exist. It then flourishes because no one is willing to point it out. There is a parallel here with the findings of the Child Abuse Royal Commission. The long period of denial of child abuse happening and the use of cover-ups was a period when it was safe to abuse children in the church because there would be no public exposure or consequences for the perpetuator. Denial of the problem makes the problem bigger and harder to manage. We need to stop attacking the health management for failing to deal with bullying. We need to reduce the confrontation and emphasize the problem as an ongoing one of patient safety that will never really go away. Then there needs to be a cooperative approach to improving workplace culture. Management will clearly fail to eliminate bullying, just as the church will not eliminate sexual abuse by the clergy. The church is now accepting the problem will be ongoing and is setting in place mechanisms to respond effectively to the problem. Health departments need to take a similar approach, an approach aimed at reducing the problem and responding to it as it arises. Fourthly, kindness needs to be shown to both parties, the victim and the bully. We need to consider why someone is a bully. Helping bullies to change is important if we want to improve the system. So often we find administrators are intolerant of bad patient outcomes. There is often the assumption that a bad outcome means a bad nurse or doctor has failed the patient. We all want administrators to support staff who are struggling with a poor outcome. We want administrators to encourage a system of accepting mistakes and bad outcomes will occur, and provided staff have been conscientious, we want administrators to support a system of learning from poor outcomes. If clinicians are to be allowed support after clinical mistakes or poor outcomes, then the bullies need to be allowed to learn from their experience. That requires a system to assist change in the bully. In healthcare, we are moving into an era of open disclosure when things go wrong for the patient. We have not yet moved to an era of similar honesty when it comes to dealing with bullying and toxic workplaces. Open disclosure to patients and their families when error occurs is clearly just. It has also been promoted because it stops families and damaged patients becoming angered by being lied to. Apology to victims of bullying is a similar matter of justice and has the advantage of not driving the victim to be angry, litigious, and damaged. An apology also is an act of kindness. Healthcare started as attempts by society to be kind to the suffering of patients. We need to reach back and remember the original vision of healthcare in our dealings with one another in the workplace. The confidentiality agreements the victims sign when paid out are another side of the denial coin. By paying the victim compensation conditional on the victim not talking about the compensation or the actions and injuries they were compensated for, prevents us all from being able to have honest conversations about problems that need to be resolved. Problems that cannot be discussed cannot be resolved. Confidentiality agreements not only deny the right to air one's injury, they protect the system against public scrutiny, and they reinforce denial. For years, the churches used confidentiality agreements to shut down publicity about abuse. Fifthly, the problem of workplace bullying can also be viewed in purely economic terms. Bullying is a serious contributor to staff leaving the workplace. This is not cheap. In 2015, a study showed the cost of replacing one nurse in Western Australia was $58,000, and the rate of staff turnover was 17%. Bullying, being a serious contributor to this staff turnover, is taking funds out of the system. Dollars spent on replacing staff are dollars not available to treat patients. The Victorian Public Sector Survey in 2010 showed that bullying doubled the probability a person would resign, and work sites with bullying had higher sick leave costs. There is no use talking about justice to those parts of the health administration charged with managing costs. I do not believe they are interested in arguments about justice. We need to have a specific and clear message for them that bullying in healthcare costs a lot of money. Once again, this requires us to get past our own self-pity and sense of injustice, because it will not get through to economic managers. In summary, we all need to see workplace bullying as something much bigger than our own tragic stories. It is the failure of kindness to be valued in the workplace. It is a consequence of our loss of sense of what really matters. We need to see workplace bullying in healthcare as a threat to good patient care. We need to see it as a challenge for us to be better than the bullies and to display kindness towards the victims. We need to accept it will never go away, but that it can be managed. Just as the rate of post-operative infection will never go away completely, but with care is reduced and managed. Just as cleanliness and sterility are the cornerstones of managing infections in hospitals, the virtue kindness is a major factor we need to call on to counter bullying. Demanding justice has not got us far. Demanding accountability has not got us far. Perhaps as the caring professions, we need to lead with the courage to be kind. Thank you.